There goes the drinks trolley. One more time. Let's grab something tasty. What do you have for us today, Suze?
Well, I've got another 0.5% alcohol, but this time it's a stout, which is very unusual. It's Wiper and True brewery, and it's a collaboration with London's 5 Points. And yeah, a dry, chocolatey, malty stout, and they actually make it normally and then use a de-alcoholization process to remove the alcohol. So tastes great, only 0.5%.
That's very good. I hear good things about 0% Guinness as well, which is
also very tasty.
Okay. So today's confession comes from Tom, first of the week. From Tom, thank you, Tom, Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. There's some dodgy behaviour in here. It's a little bit sordid.
Sordid?
I think so.
Sordid.
I need to finally confess something that happened over 20 years ago. Back in February 2001, I was nursing a bruised and battered heart. I'd flown to Spain to try and rekindle a relationship with a Finnish girl who split up with me whilst Love is a Roller Coaster by Ronan Keating was playing on the radio.
Oh, no.
I've hated that song ever since. And Ronan, to be honest.
Oh.
Sorry, Ronan. Not his fault.
No.
I never got the chance to meet her again, and broken-hearted, I went to stay with my friend Wendy, who lives in the... I'm just going to check this with Matt. Algeciras. No.
Right. Go on.
Near Granada in Andalusia.
Yes. Okay, well, let's go with that then.
Alpujarras.
Alpujarras.
There.
Yes.
One night, she drove us to a party a few hours away. Well, since the party was so far from her house, we were staying with some of her friends who lived in a small hamlet that had been abandoned by the locals but taken over by hippies and other eco-minded people.
Right. Yeah. No running water then.
The party was at another eco-commune in the countryside in Almira province.
Fabulous.
And most of the people there obviously knew each other very well. It's fair to say they were pretty fanatical about their eco-credentials. It's not that I disagreed with them on climate change or being vegan, but the party guests were a bit crusty, shall we say, a bit unforgiving of anyone who didn't have the same beliefs as they did. I also probably wasn't the best company. I was feeling very sorry for myself, what with that Finnish woman, and I felt pretty miserable at being dumped, and it was Ronan Keating's fault. Anyway, they weren't exactly welcoming. The first mistake I made was to mention that I wasn't vegetarian when I jokingly said that the bean stew could do with a bit of beef being in it. Half the guests stopped talking to me then. The second mistake was to explain that I had flown to Spain and not driven or got the train. One woman actually turned her back on me, muttering something unrepeatable about how I was killing the planet. So there was nothing left to do except sit by the fire, stare at the beautiful stars and drink lots of very rough wine and drown my sorrows, always drinking responsibly. I have no idea what time we drove back to her friend's house, but it was late and I was rather the worse for wear. Wendy hadn't been drinking as she was driving, and within minutes I fell into a deep sleep. What I didn't know until after is that poor Wendy had to drive home on a very cold night with the window open as I was snoring in the old sense of the word and trumping all the way home.
Oh, right.
Because of the bean stew. When we got to our friend's eco house, I had sobered up a bit, and her friend showed us our room and then explained the toilet in the bathroom. As it was on the eco farm, there was a compost toilet. I remember hearing something about a sit-down loo for one thing, and then there was a blue bucket for the other thing.
Okay.
I got into the bathroom and there was a large blue barrel by the door with a small footstool near it, and I lifted the lid of the barrel. It smelled a little bit dodgy, but it was also nearly full to the brim. It seemed a bit weird to have such a large barrel to wee in, but anyway, if you're bursting, you're bursting. So I took the lid off, I stood on the footstool and did what I had to do. I then put the lid back on and went to bed. The next day, I had the most raging hangover, obviously, not helped by Wendy complaining about how she'd had to drive home in the cold because of my drunken antics. In the daylight, the freeholding where Wendy's friends lived was lovely. They showed us around and explained how they recycled the compost loo. Oh, and we make our own wine as well, she said.
No.
Would you like to try some? Now, I was still feeling a little worse for wear and couldn't face another drink, but she insisted we'd try. It's almost ready, she carried on. In fact, you saw it already. It's in the bathroom, in the huge blue barrel by the door. I had an awful feeling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the hangover. What I hadn't seen in my state was that there was a small blue bucket next to the toilet, and obviously this was not the same as the massive barrel next to the door. I came back and made my excuses for not having any wine. Wendy was driving, so she didn't have any either, but there was no way I could say anything. A year or so later, I actually met the wine-producing couple again at another party. They talked about their vintage year of homemade wine and how good it was and how I had clearly missed out. Well, Father Simon, I'd like to beg your forgiveness, not for watering down the wine, because frankly, I think I probably improved it no end. I do not wish to apologise for flying to Spain or eating meat, though we should all be wary of things like that. I would like to beg forgiveness from Wendy, who had to drive home in the middle of the night in the freezing cold whilst I snored and burped and created my own greenhouse gases. It's an awful thing to do to a friend, and I am truly repentant. I think we've noticed that actually she also drove all the time. You seem to do no driving at all. She just drove all the time. So I'm not quite sure about your personality or your character, Tom. But anyway, this will be judged by Sister Susie right now. Here we go.
Yeah, Tom, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how sorry he is, really. And I almost forgave just for the hippie Hamlet and how much Matt wouldn't like to be there.
Matt would have loved it.
Quite funny, and the compost toilet and all of that. But use your brain. That you're not going to have a huge barrel that you're going to have to stand on a step to pee in, are you? That's just maybe you should have asked and been is this really where I need to do a number one? And then the answer would be no. And no, I can't believe that you made people drink that. No, not forgiven, Tom. Disgusting.
I feel worse now that Susie's been so condemnatory. But what do you say, Brother Malcolm?
I'm going to forgive. Who keeps the homemade wine in the loo? That seems a little bit like it's asking for trouble, really.
Yes.
I don't think that's such a good idea. Also, not a massive fan of bean stew, or indeed lots of people having a go at me because I once got on a plane, or eco-communes, or any of that. I do agree that he should have shared the driving, but and also it wasn't his fault, was it? All of the things going on in the car, it was all down to the beef stew again. Or bean stew. Would have been better with beef stew. We would have no problems. So for those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
61054, people's verdict, please. First word has to be Simon. Do you forgive Tom? Yes or no? The people's verdict is expected. So first up, and just before the news, we had our first confession of the week from Tom. The story of a Spanish eco-commune full of hippies, Ronan Keating, and getting confused about the winemaking tub because it did look like a loo.
Yes, it did.
That was the thing. Homemade alcohol, always going to be a problem area, particularly on a commune. Let's see what we make of these verdicts which have just come in. Here we go.
So Samantha says, not forgiven. Surely, if he'd opened the barrel, he would have smelled the wine. I'm surprised he didn't realise sooner. But Dougie and Stevenage says, forgiven. I'm with Matt on this one. Who makes wine in their toilet? Where's the hygiene in that? We've all made mistakes, and when you got to go, you got to go, especially when you've had a few. And Michelle in Belfast says, forgiven. Why on earth was there a barrel of wine in the toilet? That seems both gross and unhygienic. I'm with the bloke. That's me, Michelle, thanks. It sounds confusing to me.
Thanks, bloke. And no if you have a confession, we would love to have it, please. And if we use it, well, we'll exchange it for a smart speaker. 61054 on the text. However, the email is confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Time for the drinks trolley. I think some refreshment is called for. Let's hope Sister Susie's got something special lined up. What do you have for us today?
I have a very lovely Cali Pale Ale from Tiny Rebel, 4.6%. Fruity, juicy, will make you think of summer. Very lovely.
Okay, very good. Well, I'll have some of that. Can you have some delivered? Thank you very much.
That'd be great.
We'd like that. Today's confession, which is called Love's Hot Fevered Iron, which is also going to be the name of my memoir, I think.
Wow.
Can you imagine anything more unlikely?
Bold statement.
Comes from the Reverend Timothy. Thank you, Timothy, for dear Father Simon and the pardoning pundits. As a vicar in the Church of England, immediately people sit up and
yes, they do.
There are probably a few confessions I could relate, but as I don't want to invoke the wrath of the bishop, I want to tell you this story. But just to be safe, I have changed the names of the couple in the story. The story begins a few years ago as we were coming out of lockdown. We were allowed to hold church services again, and I could also start visiting people at home who couldn't get to church and then take communion. There was one couple, Fred and Wilma, who lived in a small cottage just up the hill from my church, and while they occasionally made it to church, more often than not, they requested that I go to them and bring them the required bread and wine. I was happy to oblige, as amongst all my parishioners, they were relatively easygoing and pleasant to talk to.
Okay.
As opposed to all the others.
Right.
This isn't the same vicar who pushed the woman in the grave,
him.
by the way.
Oh, right.
I would usually visit around once a month. The visits would always follow the same pattern. Fred would let me in, and Wilma would be seated on the sofa, ready to tell me about her latest medical ailment. I would unpack my home communion kit, and the short service would happen without a hitch. Then, Wilma would make a cup of tea and feed me a slice of homemade cake, and we would have some pleasant chit-chat. After an hour or so, I would make my excuses and head off. Initially, I didn't quite realise my mistake during these visits. When I was handed my slice of homemade cake, I took a bite and made the polite, appropriate, appreciative noises. That's so lovely, thank you so much. I think I sounded sincere because the cake was absolutely terrible. I mean, really, really bad. It was more suited to being a doorstop than a cake. It was dry, bland and tasteless. But I couldn't say that, of course, I'm the vicar. Wilma looked pleased that I had enjoyed her cake, so I kept up the pretense. On my next visit, though, as I stood up to leave, Wilma also stood up and with a proud look on her face handed me a whole cake in a plastic tub. I've made you this, she said with a smile. I had to look pleased, even though I knew it would be the same substandard quality that all her baking efforts had been and would weigh a ton. So I made all of the right noises and departed with an entire cake. Once at home, the cake sat in the kitchen uneaten for several days. Even my teenage son refused to eat it, and he'll eat anything. So with a heavy heart and a slightly guilty conscience, the cake went in the bin. All of it. A few weeks later, I returned the plastic tub, but was presented with another cake.
Oh, good.
I'm afraid that cake went in the bin as well. As has every cake I've been given by Fred and Wilma for the last 3 years. Today I visited Fred and Wilma again, and they gave me yet another cake, which has also gone straight into the bin. Cake bin, cake bin, cake bin, cake, 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 bin, bin, bin. Victoria sponge, bin. Ginger and chocolate, bin. Elaborate showstopper with tinned gooseberries and midget gems, in the bin.
Oh, midget gems.
Oh, wow.
They were good, weren't they, back in the day?
Yeah,
I'll take the taste away. So obviously, says the Reverend Timothy, I seek, not his real name either, I seek forgiveness from Fred and Wilma as they put so much effort into those substandard cakes. And I could have at any point claimed to be on a diet or given another excuse as to why I couldn't possibly take home another cake. But Wilma looked so pleased that the vicar was taking her cake home that it was so very hard to say no. I also seek forgiveness from my family, who would always get excited when I came home with a cake, only to be bitterly disappointed when they discovered it was from Fred and Wilma. Yours, hopefully, the Reverend Timothy, who, you can sort your own forgiveness, can't you, if you're a reverend? But anyway, yes. Thank you, Reverend Timothy, for turning to Greatest Hits Radio for forgiveness where it matters. Sister Susie, what do you say to the Reverend Timothy?
Well, I like this, Reverend Timothy, and I think, maybe just you were too enthusiastic the first time that you ate the cake, that if you'd have just not done that, then maybe we wouldn't be here now. And I just feel like you could have... She needs some feedback because you might not be the only person that she's giving cake to. Yeah. So therefore, take one for the team and be honest. And isn't that what a vicar should do? And tell her the truth, or just say, you're a celiac and you can't eat cake anymore.
That's right. Yeah, I've just been diagnosed as celiac. Although that would be a lie.
Yes. Well, it would be. Yeah. Okay. Well, I am not going to forgive Reverend Timothy just because of his family. I agree with them. If my family had brought cake home, I would be excited and I would be disappointed. So
I wonder if couldn't he give it to a needy person?
Yes. Make them have the dreadful cake.
Yeah, they must have a cake morning or something at the...
Let them eat the bricks.
Well, that'd be better than throwing it away.
Coffee morning at the church.
Yeah, maybe.
A playgroup. Oh, I bet the mums would eat it.
Yeah.
Brother Matthew.
So give it to them. Yes, I'm definitely going to forgive because we've all been in that situation where you're given food that's not very good and you can't say, I find this, Wilma, to be bland and uninteresting. You say, oh, how lovely, this is very nice, and please give me another one every time I come here for the next 3 years. Yes, they're definitely going to forgive. I mean, law of averages says she's going to get it right at some point.
Do you think?
At some point, that cake with the midget gems and everything else in it, something's going to happen. And in the words of Fleetwood Mac, don't stop Wilma, with making all those fabulous cakes.
Imagine the
forgiven.
thump as the cake hits the bin one more time. People's verdict, please, 61054. Good evening, this is Greatest Hits Radio. Just before the news, we had a confession from the Reverend Timothy about the little visits that he does on a monthly basis to take communion to Fred and Wilma. Wilma bakes him an entire cake every time, and he, because it's such a revolting thing, chucks it away because nobody wants to eat it. And there have been many, many cakes over the years. There's like 36 cakes which have gone straight in the bin. Anyway, the Reverend Timothy needs some forgiveness. What did he get, Matt?
Not forgiven, says Pam in Angus. If he isn't trying them, then how does he know they haven't improved? He may be chucking away amazing cakes. Simon the gas fireman says, forgiven. As a gas fire service engineer of 40 years, my perfect excuse for not eating cake is I'm diabetic, lactose intolerant, and always watching my weight. Totally forgiven. But Lucy says, please forgive. I've been chucking out nut roast for 3 years, given to me by a kind friend. Hard to say no.
So thank you for the verdicts, which we have now passed to the Reverend Timothy, who does get a smart speaker, which is a very lovely thing. If you have a confession, we would love to see it, and all you do is you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. 13 minutes to 6 o'clock, and high time we deserve some refreshment. There it goes, trundling past. Grab something from the drinks trolley, and what do we have today, Suze?
I've gone for a nice white wine today, and you can have whatever you like. I had a really lovely Benji Blanco, which was from the volcanic slopes of Tenerife at the weekend. So,
right, Benji Blanco. Okay, would that be a strong one or a little nice?
No, I think it's 10%. I think it's not so strong. It's quite nice and tasty.
Thanks for the tip. Today's confession comes from Professor Perilous. This is how he signed off. And I should say it's a 15 certificate.
Oh, good.
It does contain unpleasant scenes.
Oh, I'll bet.
Also scenes of unpleasantness. Dear sacred shepherds of our souls, I have recently retired from teaching. Always a dangerous start.
Yeah.
And I started to think back over some of the events of my work life. Please, therefore, bear in mind it was different times. I know that you've had a number of school confessions, notably the exploding frogs, and yes, dangerous substance number 1 was very fun. But not as much fun as the reaction, which I'm going to be calling reaction number 2. This is not that kind of number 2. This is just, we're just coding it because I don't want to give any details. But it's done in a baked bean tin. But it's not a good idea, as I discovered it melts through the bottom of the tin, scorching the desktop and damaging clothes and setting fire to books.
What?
As the molten metal shoots out. Methane rockets and making smoke bombs were also quite interesting. One of my favourites was dropping copper coins into fluid number 3 to show the difference between pre and post 1992 coins and why some copper coins are magnetic. This was all done outside in a sheltered corner so the fumes could escape more easily. I changed schools a lot.
Imagine.
With the longest stay in a school 5 years and the shortest 1 year. 1 year in a post was sometimes enough. I was fortunate to have worked across the country in a range of places, including sixth forms, secondary schools, middle schools, primary schools, young offender institutes, and pupil referral units. I know some people specialise, but I like to go with the flow. This particular confession relates to my first term in a new school. I was teaching science, DT, English, ICT, and games. PE teachers really hate that phrase. That's a wide curricula, I think, which he has to teach.
Yeah, pretty varied.
The start of this confession started in the science lab with a class of year 7 pupils. We were reacting HCl, which is hydrochloric acid, with magnesium to evolve hydrogen. This involves using a glass delivery tube that passes through a bung. Now, I'm sure most listeners will have done this very common and simple experiment. Clearly, they will all have been told not to turn the glass tube as it can snap, leaving a sharp circle of glass. Unfortunately, one girl, let's call her Alice, decided to move it. I discovered this when she came up to me, having impaled her palm on the glass tube. When I say impaled, it hadn't gone all the way through. It was just into the palm. Fortunately, blood and other people's pain I can cope with. So, having checked the chemicals were not spilt, I sent her off to the office with a friend. There wasn't too much blood, but I thought sending her off alone would be unprofessional. The good news is that it didn't need any stitches, so everything was fine.
Oh, it's fine. Okay.
Later that term, part 2. Later that term, I was teaching the same class, DT. Now we had a wonderful workshop with a bandsaw, teacher use only, pillar drill, scroll saw, disc sander, if you're getting nervous, you should be, and an array of hand tools, all for the children to use.
Fine.
Before any child could use them, I had to give a demonstration and then note down the date and who was there to ensure they had all heard it. The disc sander was a wonderful piece of machinery that could easily strip wood or anything that touched it. I went through the safety talk, showed how to hold wood and how not to hold wood, explained the dangers and why we do it certain ways. I then let the children start. They didn't need to ask to use the tools as they were all trained. Also, I thought, I was just helping a child when I felt a shadow lurk at my shoulder. I usually ignored this and carried on, but the little sharp intakes of breath attracted my subconscious. I turned around and saw Alice, holding her hand with one finger sticking out. Interestingly, the end was dripping with blood. I surmised quickly what had happened. She had sanded off the very tip of her finger. In my defense, she had not been following instructions, which I saw later when I looked at what she'd been sanding. Now, once again, I packed her off to the school office with a friend. Again, ever the professional. Now, this was an interesting term for me, as I also managed to have a gas leak in the lab that was smelt on the other side of the school. I set off the fire alarm 3 times and was blamed for the 4th until it was traced to the kitchen. I was also made the union health and safety rep. Always doing my part. Now asking for forgiveness. I don't ask for forgiveness from the head teacher or head of department, as there were never any complaints. I don't ask forgiveness from the classes that may have been a bit disrupted, as I always quickly disposed of the injured child, but not in that way. I don't even ask for forgiveness from Alice, as her hand was fine. My favourite sentence, I know this, as in the summer term I taught her javelin.
What?
And she had no issues at all holding it.
No.
However, I do ask forgiveness from Alice's mother, not for the damaging stuff earlier, but when I went for a job interview at a school at which her mother was the secretary. She was professional all the time, and this may have been hard for her. Surprisingly, I didn't get the job. So for putting this very kind mother of this polite and helpful child in a difficult situation, I ask for forgiveness, and I hope you can find it in your hearts to do so. No children were harmed in the making of this confession. Well,
apart from Alice.
Apart from Alice. But it wasn't Professor Perilous's fault.
No.
Because you give instructions, you give all the safety talk, and then it's kind of up to the kids. But I know which way Sister Susie is going to go.
Well, no, because I say a class of children and DT is always a bad combination, in my opinion. Talking from experience, I once glue gunned my finger at a DT class, which also didn't go well. So I feel like I'm on Alice's side here. Also, he was probably doing a bit too much, wasn't he? Jack of all trades, master of none, maybe you would say about the good old professor there. But if you knew she wasn't very good, maybe you should have kept a bit of a closer eye on her. And for that reason, I can't forgive you.
Games, ICT, English, DT, and teaching science asking for trouble, Brother Matthew.
Yeah, I would say if you're attending chemistry lessons or lessons involving power tools, maybe pay attention to the instructions at the start, you know.
Children.
That's what they're all they're supposed to be doing, and they're not doing it, and so really it's all Alice's fault in a way, isn't it? I have to think about all of these interviews he went for, where they're all why did you only spend a year at this school? Well, there was a gas leak, also somebody lost the top of their finger, and there was the other thing with the explosion. Fault. Definitely not my fault, by the way. So yeah, but no, for all of those reasons I'm going to forgive.
And I can see why he was made the Union Health and Safety rep.
Well,
I mean, who else are you going to choose? Okay, 61054 on the text, please. First word is Simon on the People's Verdict. Just before the news, we had a confession from Professor Perilous, who was a teacher, just retired, and pupil Alice, a glass tube, a disc sander, and what was left of her finger. But everyone was okay in the end, pretty much. And she could throw a javelin, which was a wonderful thing. People's Verdict, here we go.
So forgiven, says Gemma in Swanage. Sounds like the girl should have been paying attention properly to the health and safety brief. Wasn't his fault she attempted to chop her finger off. Also forgiven, says John. Our science teacher taught us to make gunpowder. There was an interesting period when sudden noises were followed by people diving for cover. And Jane in Burnham says forgiven. This is a tough one. My son did the same. Sanded the top off his finger when he was 13. He was in agony for days. It wasn't nice. But was it character building? Did he learn to be careful around tools? Possibly. Kids are a bit stupid and careless. It's part of being a kid. So, on balance, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, well, we got there. Okay, Jane, John and Gemma, thank you very much indeed, and thanks for the other verdicts. And if you have a confession inspired maybe by today's, heaven forbid, it's confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And now it's time to put my green tea with extra ginger aside because it's the drinks trolley, and although Susie's actually in the studio so she can actually deliver the drink this time, fresh from the bar, what have you chosen for us?
Well, I've chosen, seeing as it's getting towards the end of January, there's one more alcohol-free that I wanted to share with you, and it is called Run Free. It's a Left-Handed Giant brewery in Bristol, and they have a run club, and it was inspired by their run club to make an alcohol-free beer for them to drink once they'd come back from a run. So Run Free.
Okay, we'll have one of those and then see what Nigel delivers very shortly.
Yes.
To go with his hot pot. Okay, today's confession comes from Dave in Grimsby. Thank you, Dave. Father Simon and the Compassionate Collective Canon wish to seek forgiveness for an event that actually this is sort of in your wheelhouse, Matt, from back in the day.
Wow.
Back in the day, really? Wow.
Wish to seek forgiveness for an event that happened about 10 years ago when I was still living at home with my parents in South Manchester. Before her commitments of children and dogs, my sister looked after a horse on a local livery yard.
There you go.
And while she was at work, my mum and dad would help with all of the, shall we say, more tedious tasks of looking after the horse, of which there are many. One such task was running up to the local farm and equestrian shop to pick up supplies such as hay, carrots, and any treatments that the horse might need. And this, Father Simon, is where I need to seek forgiveness. You see, my dad would often have to write out the list of what he needed on a small scrap of paper just to make sure he didn't miss anything with a specific name or get the wrong brand, because it's very, very important to get the right brand.
Yes.
On one such occasion, he left the scrap of paper on the counter in the kitchen, and I thought it might be funny to add an extra fictional item to see whether my dad would actually ask for it in the shop, or whether he would, as I believed that he would, see through the ruse. I remember hearing about how some well-known footballers who owned racehorses were allowed to give them funny names.
Oh, yes.
Some of which aren't fit for broadcast, but other amusing ones included Another Horse.
Yes, that's Robbie Fowler's. Yeah.
A horse called Another Horse.
Another Horse, yes.
Come on, Another Horse.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay. And the name I'd now written down on the scrap of paper, passing it off as a product my dad might need to buy for my sister. So this is actually the name of a horse, but I was writing it down as a product, says Dave in Grimsby.
Okay.
Well, Father Simon, my dad duly took the list and went off to the farm shop, and it was only when he got back and explained to my sister about what had gone on that things became clear for him. As it turned out, he'd gone into the shop and managed to find everything except for this new product, this one thing that I'd added that he'd been asked to buy. So he went to the counter and asked the man to help him find Hoof-Hearted. Apparently, he'd repeatedly asked Hoof-Hearted, but seemingly all it did was make the man laugh all the more. Although the man in the shop probably thought it was a wind-up rather than someone taking it quite seriously. Would that be allowed as the name of a horse?
I think you can get away with that.
Come on, Hoof-Hearted.
Hoof-Hearted, yes.
He apparently
childish.
spoke to my sister later on to explain that he hadn't been able to get everything on the list, but he was sure he could find Hoof-Hearted somewhere else. So that's what he tried to do. But it was only when my sister explained that it wasn't actually a real product, and to break up the two words differently, did he realise what he'd been asking for in the shop. Suffice to say, my dad figured it must have been me, and thankfully was able to see the funny side of it. I therefore need to seek forgiveness from my dad, who still gets regularly reminded of the time he asked Hoof-Hearted very loudly in the farm shop, and seemingly takes it with good grace, even though it must irritate him greatly every time the story is mentioned. If it's any consolation, we all moved out of the area a couple of years later, never having to visit that farm shop again, and live quite spread out from each other, so the chance for japes are very limited. Although I do worry about being on the receiving end at some point from my eldest son, who's developing a cheeky sense of humour, even at the age of 3. I fall upon your mercy and I seek your wisdom and guidance. Dave in Grimsby. Well, I have heard about the let's see if we can get away with calling our horse this.
Yeah.
But Dave's turned it into a gag and played it on his dad, and it seemed to work. Sister Susie.
Well, yeah, Very funny, Dave. Just a bit silly and childish, isn't it?
It's a grown man.
Yeah, well, he is now.
I'm
like, you're a grown man. It's
so funny.
Do you know what? I just think it is funny, but it's all like that wasted time, didn't it? It wasted the time of his dad. It wasted the time of the people in the shop.
You're very hardcore.
Just wasted people's time, and also maybe he deserves what his son is going to do it to him.
Yes,
and then he won't be as grateful for it, will he? So I'm not going to forgive now. It's very silly.
Okay, I thought you might have forgiven, but no, you're still hardcore, brother Matthew.
I mean, so I'm going to forgive, and I'm going to forgive because obviously everyone in the shop loved it, and
did they?
And Dave took the opportunity, didn't he? He was having a bit of fun, and the hoof thing works, doesn't it? Because typically horses have hooves, 4 of them normally. That's my great knowledge of horses there coming to the fore.
Is that what it ends?
A year well spent. Hello to all my friends in horseland, and so for all of those reasons given previously, I choose to forgive.
Okay, not really very good reasons.
Very good reasons.
Is Horseland an actual supply shop?
Horse. Imagine that. Everything for your horse.
Okay, people's verdict, please. 61054. People's verdict on Dave in Grimsby. The first word has to be Simon, and you can WhatsApp us 0333 2020 402. For the news at 6 o'clock, we had a horsey confession from Dave in Grimsby, who basically he knew that there were some horses that had funny names. For example, you know some other horses which have got some strange names.
Yes, so we've had 50 Shades of Hay. Why not that? May the horse be with you. Pony Soprano, and of course Horsey McHorseface.
Okay, obviously. And there are also some very rude ones. But anyway, there was also one called Hoof Hearted, and Dave put it on a shopping list for his dad, and he then went to the shop and said, "Have you got any Hoof Hearted?" And and so on. With hilarious consequences. Anyway, here comes the people's verdict.
So Matt, the horse dentist in Bridge North, says, totally forgiven, brilliant prank. Stephen New Brighton, forgiven. Initially, I was half-hearted about hoof-hearted, but as it was taken well by all sides, I forgive. And Sam says, I totally forgive. I trim cows' feet. I wanted to start my own business and went to the post office where you could print out your own business cards and came out with cards saying hoof-hearted. Every time I read one, I wet myself laughing. Sam the fruit trimmer from somewhere in Somerset.
Sam the foot trimmer. Well, that's very good. Okay, Sam, thank you very much, and thank you, Steve. And thank you, Matt, the horse dentist, and everyone who sent in a verdict for the confession. And if there is a confession that you fancy getting onto the radio, let us know about it. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.